The year was 1883. The frontier stretched endless and wild, where the earth cracked under drought, and the heavens split open with storms like the wrath of God. Luke Harlowe rode through it all. His horse, a scarred bay named Bramble, trudged across mud-thick trails, hooves sinking deep. Luke's hat brim dripped with rain, and his long coat clung heavy against his frame. He was a man weather-beaten by the plains, haunted by the gunpowder. Ghosts of the Civil War, carrying silence like a second skin, thunder rolled low, like distant cannon fire, and for a moment Luke's chest tightened with old memories. He reined Bramble to a halt. That's when he heard it. Through the roar of the storm a sound too fragile to be mistake. The thin, desperate cries of children. Luke straightened in the saddle. His hand drifted toward the revolver at his hip. Something was wrong. He spurred Bramble forward, mud spraying from the horse's hooves. The cries grew louder, weaving between the thunder. Rounding a bend, Luke saw the wreck. A wagon lay shattered against a boulder, its canvas torn to ribbons by wind and rain. A broken wheel spun aimlessly in the floodwater. Lightning flared white across the scene, revealing two small shapes clinging to each other beneath the wreckage. Children, soaked to the bone, shivering like lost pups. But it wasn't the children that made Luke pull sharply on the reins. Beside them stood a figure, slender, wrapped in drenched calico. Long, wet strands of hair clung to delicate features, a face pale in the stormlight. For one breathless instant, Luke thought he saw a widow, frail, almost angelic, holding the little ones with desperate arms. The figure's form, the curve of their shoulders, the way they shielded the children, it stirred something in Luke. An instinct to protect, a pull in his chest he hadn't felt in years. "Ma'am," he called out through the rain, his voice roughened by wind. The figure turned sharply. Eyes caught the lightning, deep and piercing. Not the soft gaze of a widow. Not a woman's eyes at all. Luke blinked. His stomach lurched with confusion. The figure stepped closer, and Luke saw plainly. Now this was no woman. He was a man, younger than Luke, perhaps mid-20s, but with features so fine they blurred the line of expectation. High cheekbones, smooth skin despite the storm's bite, lips pressed with quiet strength. His soaked shirt clung to a lean frame, revealing not fragility but wiry endurance. The man adjusted the child, clinging to his side. "You're armed," he said softly, voice low but steady. "Please, keep it lowered. They're only children." Luke's hand hesitated near his revolver before he let it fall away. "I thought you were." He stopped himself, jaw tightening. The man met his gaze without shame, though his eyes carried exhaustion. "My name's Elias Raynor. These children aren't mine. Their folks were my neighbors." He swallowed, voice breaking briefly. "Bandits. Rode in 3 nights ago, burned the homestead. Their ma and pa didn't make it. I swore I wouldn't let the little ones die out here too." The boy and girl pressed closer against Elias's sides. Their eyes were wide with hunger and fear. Luke shifted uneasily in the saddle, rain dripping from his hat brim. "Hell of a promise to make," he muttered. Elias only nodded. Somebody had to. 4. First, tension and misunderstanding. For a long moment, Luke just stared. Something twisted inside him, a tangle of confusion, admiration, and a strange discomfort he couldn't name. When he'd first laid eyes on Elias, his chest had stirred with instinctive recognition of beauty. But beauty had never worn a man's face in Luke's world. He fought the thought like he'd fight down whiskey burn, yet it lingered all the same. "You travelin' alone with kids?" Luke asked gruffly, his voice more bark than question. Elias's chin lifted. "I'm keeping them alive, if that's what you mean." Lightning split the sky again, outlining the wrecked wagon. Luke studied him, almost hoping to find weakness in Elias's stance. Instead, he saw defiance. A man unarmed, trembling from cold, but rooted by something stronger than fear. "Why didn't you leave?" Luke pressed. Elias's reply came quick, sharp. "Because I'm not made of stone." The answer silenced Luke. It cut deeper than a bullet, straight through his calloused pride. The children whimpered. Elias pulled them closer, shielding them from the storm. His arms were frail-looking, but his resolve wasn't. Luke's jaw flexed. This wasn't what he expected, and he didn't like not knowing what to make of him. A crack of rifle fire shattered the air. Bark exploded from a tree trunk just yards behind Luke's horse. Bramble reared, and Luke steadied him with a sharp tug on the reins. "Down," he barked. Elias pulled the children under the wagon wreckage as bullets snapped through the rain shadows. Moved on the ridge above dark figures against the lightning. Bandits. The same devils who'd burned the children's home. They hadn't finished the job. Luke drew his revolver, firing once, twice, driving the shapes back into cover. His heart pounded with a rhythm he knew too well. The war might have ended, but killing never left a man's bones. Elias clutched the children, eyes wide but unflinching. "They've been following us since the valley. I thought I'd lost them." Luke cursed under his breath. A storm, half-drowned children, and now this. He should have ridden past when he first heard the cries. He'd learned long ago that pity only led to graves. But when he glanced back, when he saw Elias, soaked through, refusing to let go of those children despite certain death, something held Luke's reins tighter than any leather strap. The storm worsened. Rain came sideways, mud sliding down the slope. Wolves howled in the distance, their cries threading with thunder. "Move," Luke barked, vaulting from the saddle. "We can't hold here." Elias hesitated. "Where?" "South Ridge. There's cover. Keep the kids close." Luke fired again, covering their scramble through the mud. Lightning lit the ridge, showing bandits closing in, rifles glinting. For every step they took, the storm fought back. Mudslides tore at their footing, cold water clawed at their legs. Elias slipped once, nearly dragging the little girl down with him, but Luke grabbed his arm, yanking them upright. Their eyes met briefly, Elias gasping, Luke scowling, but in that touch was an unspoken pact. They stumbled into a narrow gulch, rocks shielding them from the worst of the gunfire. The children cried against Elias's chest, thunder masking their sobs. Luke pressed his back to stone, revolver slick in his grip. He exhaled hard, rain dripping from his beard. "Well," he muttered, glancing at Elias, "looks like you and me just bought ourselves a fight." Elias didn't flinch. He only tightened his arms around the children and nodded. 1. Survival in the wild approximately equals 350 words. The storm broke by dawn, leaving the land raw and dripping. Clouds hung low over the ridges, steam rising from the soaked earth like ghosts fleeing. The battlefield, Luke Harlowe led the way, Bramble's hooves sucking against mud. Behind him trudged Elias, his clothes torn, but his arms steady around the children. The boy whimpered now and then, the little girl coughed from the cold, but Elias whispered lullabies, soft as rain. Luke listened without meaning to. The melodies were strange, half hymn, half lullaby threading through the morning mist. He glanced back more than once, catching the sight of Elias carrying both hope and burden in his thin frame. They pressed on for days, carving survival out of hostile ground. Rivers swelled from the storm. Luke had to hoist the children onto his shoulders to cross, while Elias steadied him with both hands. Wolves trailed them one night, yellow eyes glowing from the dark. Luke reached for his rifle, but before he could fire, Elias scattered them with firebrands, waving the torch high until the pack slunk away around the campfire. Elias's hands proved steady as he mended torn shirts with a needle drawn from his small pack. He used scraps of cloth from the wrecked wagon to patch the children's shoes. His voice soothed their fears when nightmares came clawing. Luke, hardened by years of dust and gunpowder, watched with a growing unease. He had expected Elias to be fragile, someone to protect. Instead, he found himself relying on him in ways he hadn't planned. Each night, as the firelight painted Elias's face, Luke caught himself staring to long at the steadiness in his eyes, the gentleness that never faltered. It unsettled him, shaking loose parts of himself he thought the war had burned away. By the fourth day, they knew the bandits were closing in. Luke found the signs first, a boot print pressed into wet clay, too fresh to be a hunter's. Later, an arrow wedged into a tree, the shaft marked with a notch he'd seen before the Rollins gang. Merciless men, raiders who left nothing breathing behind. That night, while the children slept, Luke whispered across the fire, "They're toying with us, leaving signs so we know they're near. Wolves in human skin." Elias's face was pale in the flames. "Then we stay ahead of them. The children can't survive another fight." Luke's jaw clenched. Better to turn and finish it. "I've faced worse odds." "No," Elias said, sharper than Luke had ever heard. "Your war won't keep them safe. Their lives are not gunpowder for you to spend." The words cut. Luke wanted to argue, to insist violence was the only way men like the Rollins understood. But Elias's hand brushed the boy's hair where he lay sleeping, and Luke fell silent. The next day nearly proved Elias right. They were crossing a ravine when a bandit scout appeared, rifle in hand, eyes glinting. Luke had his revolver out before the man could fire, shooting clean through the scout's shoulder. The gunshot echoed, drawing more shadows down the ridge. Elias hissed at him, "You've told them exactly where we are." Luke bit back anger. He knew it was true. Now the wolves were running hot on their trail. That night, Luke sat apart from the fire, staring into the dark. His revolver rested across his knees. Memories came unbidden, sharper than any blade. A farmhouse burning in Tennessee. His wife's scream cut short, the cry of a child he never reached in time. War had stripped him bare, left only ash and the skill to kill. Since then, Luke had wandered, living by the gun because nothing else remained. But now Elias, this strange, beautiful man who fought without bullets, who believed in keeping children alive with kindness instead of vengeance. It unsettled Luke more than any ambush. He felt a pull he couldn't name. Attraction, yes, but something deeper. Respect. maybe even longing for a piece of himself, he thought, dead. He clenched his fists. What kind of man looked at Elias Raynor and felt both admiration and ache? The fire cracked. Elias's voice came from the other side, soft, almost knowing. You carry ghosts, Luke, heavy ones. Luke's throat tightened. They're all I got left. No, Elias said simply. You've got more. Strength isn't only in the gun. Sometimes it's in holding on when no one else will. Luke looked across the fire. Elias's eyes met his, steady and unflinching. And for the first time in years, Luke didn't feel entirely alone. The journey stretched on, and with it, a fragile bond began to grow. One evening, as the firelight flickered, Elias sat with the little girl between his knees, braiding her tangled hair with patient fingers. Luke sharpened his rifle nearby, the steel ringing softly against stone. The contrast struck him, one man weaving gentleness, the other honing steel butt, both necessary for survival. The next day, when a rattlesnake struck from the brush, Elias was the one who saved Luke, snatching a burning branch and striking the serpent away before its fangs could land. Luke stared, stunned. He muttered a gruff thanks, but the moment lingered. Later, when floods turned a creek into a raging torrent, Luke carried Elias across on his back, the children clinging to his shoulders. He expected Elias to protest, but instead felt the man's hand steady at his chest, his breath warm against his neck. It rattled Luke more than the water itself. They spoke little, but gestures filled the silence. A shared glance when danger loomed, bread broken and passed across the fire. For Luke, something shifted. He no longer thought of Elias as a burden, not even just an ally. He was something rarer, proof that survival wasn't just about guns and grit, but about holding on to pieces of humanity Luke thought lost. That night, under a brittle moon, Luke lay awake, listening to the children's steady breathing. His hand rested near his revolver, but his eyes wandered to Elias, sleeping lightly, one arm still draped protectively over the little ones. Luke's chest tightened. He had found something he hadn't dared want in years, a reason to fight again. But dawn broke with danger. On the ridge above, shadows moved. The Rollins gang was no longer trailing. They were closing in. The ambush was coming. And for the first time in years, Luke felt a reason not to ride alone. 1. The ambush at dawn. 400 words. The first shot cracked just as the horizon blushed red. Luke's eyes flew open. He had slept in fits, his revolver never far from his hand. Now the sound of gunfire tore the morning apart. Down, he barked, dragging Bramble's reins as bullets ricocheted off stone. Dust burst around them, the canyon echoing with chaos. The children screamed, clutching Elias. He threw himself over them, body shielding their small frames, as another shot whined past. Luke rolled, firing back. His bullets sparked against the ridge, driving shadows into cover. The Rollins gang had them boxed in, at least 6 men, rifles glinting against dawn's fire. Their leader's voice boomed from above. Hand over the brats, and maybe we'll let you crawl out alive. Luke spat into the dirt. Over my dead body, gunfire thundered. Luke moved like a man possessed, every strike fueled by memories of all he had lost. He dove behind a boulder, reloading fast, teeth gritted as dust stung his eyes. A bandit slipped close, knife drawn. Luke spun to meet him, steel clashing. They grappled, grunting in the dirt. until Luke shoved the barrel of his revolver under the man's chin and pulled the trigger. The blast echoed. Luke staggered back, chest heaving. He had no time to breathe in. Other shot tore his hat clean off. He ducked, but not fast enough. Pain seared across his shoulder. His revolver slipped from his grip, skittering into the dust. The bandit raised his rifle for the finishing shot. Luke. Elias's voice cut sharp. He stood in the open torch from the fire clutched in his hand, eyes blazing. He hurled it at the gunman, flames bursting against his chest. The bandit cursed, stumbling back in panic. It gave Luke just enough time to grab his weapon and fire. The man fell. Luke looked at Elias, heart pounding harder than the bullets. The man who had seemed so fragile, so out of place, had just saved his life. The canyon rang with gunfire, smoke rising with the dawn. Luke crouched beside Elias, pulling him into cover. "Damn fool, what were you thinking?" Elias's voice was steady. "That your life was worth risking mine." Luke froze. For a breathless moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them. The screams, the gunfire, even the children's cries seemed far away. Something shifted inside Luke then, breaking free of old chains. The bond he felt with Elias was more than confusion, more than attraction he didn't understand. It was trust, respect, a tether to life itself. He wasn't fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for Elias, for the children, for something greater than himself. Rage surged through him, not the hollow rage of war, but a fire born of purpose. Luke rose, bullets singing past his ears, and charged into the fray. One by one, he cut through the gang. His revolver barked thunder. His knife found flesh. Finally, only the leader remained, snarling atop his horse, rifle aimed straight at Elias. Luke fired. The shot struck true. The bandit toppled, crashing into the dust. Silence fell. The rest scattered, broken, their courage spent. Luke stood swaying, revolver lowering as the smoke cleared. His shoulder burned with pain, blood soaking his sleeve, but his spirit burned brighter. The canyon lay quiet now, just the whisper of wind over stone, the acrid bite of gunpowder hanging heavy. Bodies littered the ground. The Rollins gang had met their end. Luke staggered, one hand pressed to his shoulder. Blood trickled between his fingers. He collapsed against a boulder, breath ragged. Elias was at his side in moments, his hands gentle yet firm as he tore cloth to bind the wound. His touch was steady, his face pale but determined. "You'll live," Elias whispered. Though his eyes shone with fear, he tried to hide. The children clung to him, their small bodies trembling. Tears streaked the girl's cheeks, but Elias began to hum again, the same lullaby that had carried them through stormy nights. Slowly, their sobs quieted. Luke watched with blurred vision. He had misjudged Elias from the moment they met, confusing beauty for weakness, gentleness for fragility. Now he saw the truth. "Elias," he rasped. The man looked down, his hands still pressing firm against the bleeding. "I was wrong about you," Luke said, each word heavy as stone. "You ain't weak, never were. You're stronger than any man I've known." Elias's expression softened. "Strength wears many faces, Luke. You taught me that too." Luke managed a faint smile, though pain etched deep lines across his face. For the first time in years, he felt more than just a gunslinger's hollow existence. He felt alive, with purpose, with bond, with something that might even be called hope. the children leaned against Elias, drifting into exhausted sleep. The canyon was quiet again, save for the soft hum of a man who had refused to let them die. By noon, they were on the move again. The canyon stretched behind them, a graveyard for outlaws. Ahead lay miles of wilderness, but also the faint promise of safety. Luke limped beside Bramble, Elias walking close with the children clutching his hands. The boy carried a stick as if it were a sword, the girl's braids swaying gently as she walked. Luke glanced at Elias, the morning sun catching his features. Once, Luke would have ridden past without a second thought, blind to what lay beneath. Now, he knew better. Sometimes the strongest allies didn't come in the shapes a man expected. Sometimes beauty wasn't weakness, but the kind of courage that kept children alive, that saved lives in the dust of a canyon. The road ahead was uncertain. They bore scars old and new, but they bore them together, and for the first time in years, Luke welcomed the wait. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments. What would you have done if you were Luke Harlowe in that canyon? Don't forget to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe for more frontier tales of courage, survival, and bonds forged in the unlikeliest places.